Chapter 9 of Edward E. Oliver's Across the Border, Pathans and the Biloch, 1884. Chapter 9, Solomon's Throne and the Gomal. According to one of the many Mohammedan legends of the place, Solomon, not content with the daughters of Jerusalem, came once to Hindustan to marry a lady named Balkis, a beauty of exceptional fame. As the happy pair were starting back on their honeymoon, seated on a throne, the flying throne of star-taught Sulaiman, carried through the air by genii, the lady begged for a halt to enable her to take one last look at her beloved home. Opportunely, they had just arrived over the Takht, and the distinguished author of the Proverbs, desirous of obliging his spouse, directed the genii to scoop out a stand on its top, upon which the throne was placed, and the fair Balkis was able to indulge her fancy for a view of the plain, recently referred to Dera dismal. The place is held in much respect, and is quite a fashionable resort of pilgrims, though the shrine, not of Solomon, but of one of the usual pole stars of guidance, extract of the herbage of religion, crocodile in the ocean of unity, is some distance north of the true Takht. The summit of this mountain, which has only recently been mapped by our surveyors, is about the center of the Sherani country, a tribe who, with their affiliated clans, extend from our border to the Khyber River in the west and north to the Gomal, or rather up to the little bit of no man's land, the bloody border that separates them from the Mahsoods Wazirs. Their main settlements are in the low hills to the east, between which and us run long, narrow valleys of the most arid and sterile character, right along to the Khazrani country in the south. Frequent but narrow gaps like the Gomal, the Sao, the Draban and the Dakhri, affording egress to the plain. The crest and upper valleys of the Takht are well wooded, though the bulk of the Sherani country is bare of trees and exceptionally barren generally. The more settled clans who occupy fixed homesteads and pasture their flocks on the higher slopes are the most friendly disposed to us. The clans nearest to us, fortunately not numerous, the least so. One or two sections, notoriously lawless, at times given to plundering villages and other malpractices. In the Sikh times they sacked Draban, and a lot of land was thrown out of cultivation through fear of their attacks. In any other respect, they are insignificant. An expedition sent against them in 1853, consisting of 2,500 of the frontier force and military police, went through the heart of their country, turned their defense, and returned to Draban without losing a single man. The fighting strength of all the clans does not exceed 3,500, the bulk of whom are desirous of maintaining good relations with us. Since this lesson they have behaved well, but they are even for Pathans, exceptionally democratic, caring nothing for chiefs, and certain of the irreconcilables not even acknowledging the Jirga. Petty thefts in British territory, which the elders admitted but pleaded their inability to enforce order, necessitated a blockade in 1883, which brought about the fullest submission and enabled us to carry out the Takht survey in 1884 with the aid of the tribesmen themselves, an event which, considering the intense dislike of all Pathans to any survey, was considered one of the greatest triumphs of our border policy. Generally of middling stature, with bold features and high cheekbones, the men of the Sherani clans are active, hardy, wild, and manly, but distinctly inferior in fighting capacity to the Waziris. For dress, the poorer tribesmen have seldom more than one coarse blanket round the waist and another over the shoulders. The chief probably adds an exceptionally dirty linen shirt, baggy Pathan trousers, and the greasy puggaree that secures his straggling black ringlets is surmounted by a dingy gold cap. His large, thick, canoe-shaped shoes were once decorated with red and gold, while if below the sheepskin postine that covers other things besides a multitude of sins, he can run to a garment of molten silk, he is a buck of the most magnificent type. A curved sword, an old English double-barreled pistol, and a powder horn complete the picture of the Sherani on the warpath, who, if he live up in the highlands, calls himself a Burgas, in contradistinction to the Lurgus who lives in the valley. As a tribe, they are exceptionally poor. They marry late in life, and unlike other Pathans, the father of the bride gives a dowry instead of receiving a price for his daughter. They have also a sort of local providence who receives tithes in kind, is called Neka, or grandfather, the chosen head of the oldest family. Money, as with many other people, is said to be scarce, perhaps exceptionally so, as their trade is mainly carried on by barter. Their principal employment is agriculture, and this is impossible without irrigation. They have few horses, absolutely no camels, and no great wealth of cattle. Except fuel, of which the Takht supplies plenty, they do not seem to have much to keep out the cold. Up on the heights they cut their houses out of the hillsides and close the entrance at night with the branch of a thorny tree. All the trade which they have is with British territory, where many of the tribe are every year located, and they are dependent on us for many of the necessaries of life. There can be no doubt that they would be infinitely better off if they were brought entirely under our rule, encouraged to settle in large numbers in the plains, helped a little in the matter of irrigation and capital for the purposes of trade. And though the altitude of the Takht is probably too great to be useful as a strategic position, it would be valuable as a sanatorium. Its fine climate, magnificent pine forests, and grand scenery would make it a much more pleasant hot weather station than the cantonment of Dera Ismail Khan. It is somewhat difficult of access, water is scarce at certain seasons of the year, at least our troops found it so, but this would be remedied by the construction of reservoirs, while the occupation of such a position would go a long way to securing a good trader route with the valleys of the Gomal and the Job. South of the Sherani country, the main watershed is held by a variety of wild tribes, of which the Ustranas, so called after a holy Sayyid who married into the Sheranis, are the chief. Their lands are mainly across the border, in villages just beyond the passes in the low outer hills, though large numbers of them are now regularly settled in the plains within it. Until about a century ago, they were entirely a pastoral or Pawinder people, when a quarrel with the Mandu Khels forced a number of them to take to agriculture. Their country is very barren and sandy, depending entirely on rainwater, but they are fine, well-set-up men, quiet and orderly, many enlisting in our army and police. Others are said to be venturesome traders, dealing largely in cattle and traveling anywhere, from Bengal to Kandahar. They are divided into two main clans, the one who wear their hair long like a Biloch, and the other who cut it short. And as between the Cavalier and Roundhead, a deadly and bloody feud exists. Eastward of these two large tribes, and between them and the Khyber River, are the Esots and the Zamarais, two small tribes of nomad Pathans of Kakar origin. Neither are of much importance and are both reported quiet and inoffensive, not extensive traders, but in the main dependent on their relations with us for the little trade they have. A handful of fakirs, called the Haripaals, on the western side of the Takht, depend on the Sheranis, and another settlement, the descendants of Sheikh Haidar, are located at Zarkani, the eastern entrance to the pass, a village which is a great burying place of the Pawindas. Beyond the Job, and between the river and the Gilzai country, are the Mandu Khels, another offshoot of the Kakas, a fairly peaceful and agricultural community, but who rarely come down to trade with us. All of these are more or less favorable to British interests, and a large proportion of the people may be said to be well under British influence. The pass known as the Gomal, and for the opening of which negotiations under Sir Robert Sandeman seem progressing so successfully, takes its name from the village and the valley on the Tank border, though the stream called the Gomal higher up bears other names along its length, and finally becomes the Luni in Dera Ismail Khan. It is popularly associated with the Pawinder traders just described, and regarded merely as the doorway of Ghazni. Really, it is a highway of the greatest strategic as well as commercial importance, for after winding through the Sulaiman range to Khyber, the plain of palms, though there are no palms and no plain beyond a stony riverbed or to where the Gomal and Takht-e-Sulaiman streams join, the road bifurcates. That along the last-named river, leading by two important routes west and southwest to Pashtoon and Kandahar. The other continuing northwest along the Gomal proper to Ghazni. Up to the junction, the whole has been mapped, a railway survey being actually commenced, and the route traversing the Shob Valley towards Pashtoon is also pretty well known. Leading more or less into this are passes like the Sheikh Haider, the Draban, and the Dana, which again communicate with one another through the lateral valleys described by Major Holdych as a peculiarity not merely of the Takht, but of the range. The Draban is even a more direct pass than the Gomal, but some lengths where nature has torn a passage through the terrific limestone gorges are at times all but impracticable. The Dana is said to be now little better, though both it and the Sheikh Haider or Zao have at times been used as the main caravan routes. The upper part of the western route is less known. For some distance it traverses the Job Valley, whence it crosses into the Kundil, follows it to the head, and across the watershed separating the Gomal and Helmand drainages to Maruf, an important place, 40 miles from Kelat-e-Gilzai. The northwestern branch, after getting clear of the Mahsood Waziris, traverses the country of the Sulaiman Kelgilzais, across the Konak range by the Sarwandi Kotal, which has an elevation of about 7,500 feet, into Katawaz, and the Shilgar country to Ghazni. The Pawinda trade which follows this last route is mainly, if not almost exclusively, in the hands of Gilzai clans like the Mandu Khels, Karotis, and Naisirs, who occupy the plains south and east of the Ab-e-Istada and the Indian side of the above-mentioned range. It may be doubted if any considerable portion of the trade comes from countries very distant beyond this range, but if it does, it is all carried by these enterprising clans whose doings have already been described. The more immediate want in the care of the Gomal, so soon as the necessary tribal arrangements have been completed, is the construction of a thoroughly good military road, adapted for all arms of the service, by the Chob Valley to Peshawar, one that would be even more valuable for the Kandahar position than that just opened from Dera Ghazi Khan by Fort Monroe. The opening out of a subsidiary route to Maruf and Kelat-e-Gilzai would necessarily follow, while the third desideratum would be a good trade route through the Sulaiman country to Ghazni. This third road, where the railway communication should hereafter be extended by the Dawar Valley to Ghazni, or by the Khyber direct to Kabul, would be invaluable as a flank protection, but as a railway route, it must take a place second to either. North of the no man's land referred to as bordering the Gomal Pass, we have to deal with a much more powerful people, and the Waziris are among the most troublesome of all the border tribes. The most important of the divisions of these are the Mahsood Waziris, whose territory only abuts on ours at the extreme end of the Gomal Valley by the Gomal Pass. Though the main road to this country is through the Tank Pass by Yandola, the remainder being shut off by the hill Bhitanis. It will therefore be convenient to refer to the latter first and reserve the Waziris and Waziristan for subsequent notice. The Bhitanis, or descendants of Bhitan, the third son of Qais, or Kesh the distinguished Afghan, who is said to have gone to Medina and brought back the true faith, and to be responsible for founding all the existing Afghan tribes, are our neighbors for 40 miles, or from the Gomal Valley to the Ghabar mountain in the Banu district. Till some 50 years ago, they lived wholly in the hills, but have now spread in numbers into the Tank Plain, and one of the three principal clans hold considerable lands there. The range separating Tank from the Marwat is also called after them, as far as the sanitarium of Sheikh Budin. On the west they are hemmed in by the Waziris, who have necessarily to pass through their territory to reach our border. The two are generally more or less at feud though, until recently the Bhitani was always ready to assist the Waziri when any robbery was afoot in our direction. In spite of their family pedigree, they are only just emerging from barbarism. Their hill possessions are stony and uncultivated, their villages small, often hidden away in hollows, their houses mere hovels of mud and brushwood. Wiry and active, they have still a reputation for stupidity and thriftlessness. 100 Bhitanis will eat 100 sheep is a countryside joke. Inveterate thieves when opportunity offers, they have been more frequently employed as spies and guides, abetting theft by their more powerful neighbours, and have earned the title of the jackals to the Waziris. The fighting strength of all the clans is probably not much in excess of 3,000 men, and their villages are entirely at our mercy. For a long time they were more or less ill-conditioned, but their acceptance in 1875 of the past responsibility has changed the character of that part of the border, and for some years the Waziri lion has been restrained and the Bhitani jackal has given no cause for complaint.